it's a pleasure, and I'm quite excited to introduce my good friend, Satish Kathirisetti. Let me give a brief introduction on him before I bring him on. So Satish has an engineering degree from Bapatla Engineering College. Then he went on to study his master's in MIT, in Madras Institute of Technology. And more, I know Satish as a solid technologist. He's a very good friend of mine.
Yeah, you might have signed up in this course thinking.
Guys, please stay on mute. Okay. So you can see Satish. Satish is a solid technologist and he's a serial entrepreneur. So he's been a founding CTO of Tanla Solutions. If you're in Hyderabad, that's very prominent. You would be seeing it. Plus, I've seen him found like multiple companies. And in fact, I will request him to speak a little bit about multiple companies. But most of his companies is in the healthcare space. So the format we have today is Satish, I would request you to introduce yourself, and then we will get to the next step. So Satish, feel free to talk more about yourself and let people know more about you, please.
Thank you so much, Vijay. I hope all of you can hear me and hear me well.
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, that's good. So yeah, thanks for the introduction, Vijay. And I've known Vijay for a very long time now. And as a part of our weekly ritual of meeting up, we do talk about all the entrepreneurial ventures that he and I have done, and what do we do on a daily basis, and how do we go forward. So I have, so my talk today, while Odin I know concentrates on data science and the way that you can apply it to different businesses and use cases. My talk today, I really don't want to take you to the extreme depths of where data science can be applied. That is something that you anyway will know along the course of what you're studying in Odin. But I will take you through a very interesting use case in one of my healthcare ventures, and how one needs to be careful when they apply data science to everything. Now, there is the notion today that everything can be solved by data science. There is this big hype that AI will solve everything, but ultimately it does rely on good data science, and good data science relies on good statistics. So there is a gradation to how you learn and where what becomes applicable. I will take you through some of the techniques that we have used to bring out some good data. But before I do that, a small brief about me. Vijay, if I can start them with a presentation which also has some little bit of information about me, and then I can sort of talk more about myself and continue with the presentation.
Absolutely. Prasad, if you could give the sharing rights to Satish, please.
I think I have that.
Oh, cool.
So are you all able to see this? And I'm guessing that you can. All right, nice. So as I said, my talk is going to be a little bit on what you can do with data science and where is it applicable, and how do you actually derive some usefulness out of data science rather than just talk about it. And that is one of the reasons why I've also put the screen that you see in front of you, because very often people think that it's a straight line to a successful venture or a successful career or a successful position or a designation. You think of it and you go behind it and you become it. But it is rarely that case. And Vijay and I can vouch for it, because this is what it really looks like. And this is what it actually is. And you have to go through your paces. You will have to try different things, because you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. So there is a lot of hard work. There is a lot of uncertainty. There is a lot of decision points in your career, in your life, in your venture, in your company, and you will have to take that into your stride. And that is why it is never a straight line of success to anything. And that is one of the reasons why I wanted to start with this, because to tell you a little bit about me, this is what I am. I have started with architecture. I did for architecture 1 year, then became a mechanical engineer, then went into manufacturing automation with specialization into robotic vision. And were any of them not useful to me? Never the case. the architecture gave me a way to look at design, the way to look at elegant solutions to a certain problems. How do I balance certain things? The mechanical engineering and automation with robotic vision gave me that insight into rigorous work, the rigor behind it, predictability of certain things that you do. And then you see my career. I have gone from building a 3D modeling software from one of the biggest companies at that point called Intergraph, doing a lot of 3D modeling, 3D surface volumes, and how they intersect with each other. Went and became the founding CTO for Tanla Solutions, which is building telecom products with 5 nines reliabilities. So you're looking at systems which will never fail. So you're looking at building systems that are safe, fail safe, having a lot of redundancy, having a lot of mechanisms to take over when systems fail. And then my next venture went into what is called as neuro-Bayesian network, which is probabilistic networks. I'm sure you have all heard of the current flavor of the month, which is the deep learning and the neural networks and people doing amazing things. But there are certain limitations to what you can do with neural networks. And that is where you have to start looking into things like uncertainty, looking into implicit error, explicit errors, and the way that there is variability in information coming in. I will take you a little bit about that later. And then we started to apply the neuro-Bayesian networks. We started looking at machine failures. Can we predict an industrial machine failing based on the various sensors which are monitoring that machine? And that brought us into healthcare, because healthcare is one area which has got the maximum amount of uncertainty in data. And this is what I keep telling a lot of my friends, or everybody that I meet, why we should have immense respect for doctors, irrespective of what we hear about them in the news. Their brains are Bayesian brains. Their brains are probabilistic modeling brains. They take in such amount of uncertain information, patients not giving them good data, patients lying about what they eat, telling they took this medicine but didn't take that medicine. Do you have pain? They will tell 10 different places where there is pain. How does a doctor take all this information and yet come out with a decision? Just imagine the kind of uncertainty that a doctor has to face in trying to arrive at what could be wrong with you. And that is why their brains are all probability brains. They're all looking at likelihoods. What could be wrong with you if you say this symptom? If to that you add this symptom, what are the other set of diagnoses which are possible? To which I add another symptom. And what are the other diagnoses which also are a union set of all of this? This is what is going in the brains. And that is how we started coming into healthcare. How do we do diabetes prediction models? How do we do healthcare conversational models coming in? So that is sort of a brief about me. As you can see that I have taken a very circuitous route to coming to where I wanted, what I wanted to do. My passion has always been to be in healthcare. And it has taken me a long winding road to reach to this place. And that is why I would like to tell all of you that people who are starting early with the Odin talk in the Odin courses, people who are starting late in the Odin courses, there is never really a bad time to start this. And no matter where you are in your career point, at which pivot point you are in your career or your life, nothing ever goes for a waste, and you should take up every possibility, every chance of learning something new, which can add to your repertoire of having a little more global thinking than rather becoming a very narrow expert. You would get to know how different systems integrate, how do they mesh with each other, what will influence another system. And this sort of gives you a bird's eye view, but also lets you drill down where you need to be. So I hope that was a good enough introduction to me, and I will go forward with my presentation. Vijay, if anything that you would like to add, then I can continue from there.
No, absolutely. I think this gives a very good flavor, and also, in fact, by the way, Satish, there are a lot of people in the class who are transitioning from some other career to a data science career. So this is a great kind of a use case that you're presenting over here.
Absolutely. I hope it will be useful to all of you. Please feel free to ask me questions at any point in time. Please also note that I may not be able to answer everything immediately, but please feel free to reach out to me over the email, which I will give out at the end of the presentation. Happy to discuss more with all of you. And so to go ahead with what we're looking at. So this is my starting point, which is a very complicated sheet that is coming up. And this is what people tend to do, that they would like to data science everything. And while it is an important aspect to keep in mind that you can analyze everything, but it is not really the best way to go forward. I could have stopped my company at this heat map, but it does not tell me anything. It has come out of a result of very rigorous statistical analysis, but what does it and where does it help me? As a business, I need to know how am I going to use this data to help build a product, build a feature, build a company, build a team. So please do understand that while data science is important, it is also very important that you keep the context around data science. How is it going to be useful? How do I visualize this information? Where is it going to be used? How does a company at the end of it make money from this analysis? Because ultimately, if you're going to join a company and somebody has to pay your salary, the company must earn income. And if it is coming out of this analysis must make sense to build a revenue stream or build a revenue generating feature. So that is why I wanted to start with this, is that please don't think that the most complicated way of doing things is the right way to go about finding a solution for a problem. Finding a solution for a problem will have multiple factors influencing it. Like I'm going to talk about the next use case, where there are so many factors influencing that use case that you have to pick your battles, and you have to see how do I constrain the system first to ensure that I get a good representation of the problem, and then go about solving it one after the other. So I hope it just gives you a flavor of why. Please don't look at data science as the end all, and it is not that you should look at the most complicated solution to start with, and neither you should jump to something as complicated as AI and doing recurrent networks and doing a convolutional networks and trying to combine both for when a standard deviation would have helped you solve the same problem, right? So with that, I will go ahead and start on the use case. I will explain a little bit about what we're trying to do. This is from my other company in Bangalore, where we work in diabetes space. Now, here we come to the meat of the problem. So I'm sure every one of you has heard about diabetes, or are currently undergoing yourself, or have a relative or a friend who is diabetic. And it is one of the biggest problems worldwide, just leave alone India itself. And to a large extent, doctors have been relying on extremely poor information to actually treat diabetes for a patient. The most common information that most of the doctors would have asked, or continue to ask many of them, is your fasting blood sugar, that is the blood sugar reading when you have just woken up and have had at least 12 hours or 8 hours of fast. And then they make you eat a very heavy breakfast, and then they do another sugar test. And that is called as postprandial, which is at the point 2 hours after that you have had your meal. They're trying to find out where are your sugar levels. I hope all of you understand about diabetes, right? I hope I don't have to explain too much about blood sugar and what it means to have diabetes. Please let me know, because I can take a pause of a minute to explain a little bit more before I go deeper into this.
So Satish, I would suggest maybe give a little brief, because the rest of the presentation is based on that, so people will have a better context.
Yeah. All right. So diabetes is a chronic disease, and essentially the people who have it have very poor control on the glucose levels in their bloodstream. What it means by glucose levels is that any amount of food, whatever food that you eat, gets converted into some form of energy for the body. And this energy is called as glucose, which in more colloquial terms is called sugar. And this is the glucose which is used by your different parts of the body, the cells, to make energy for it to continue to work. And therefore, that is why you eat, and that what you eat becomes glucose. Glucose gets mixed up in your blood. The blood then goes to all the cells. The cells take that glucose from the blood, convert it into what is called energy currency, which is called ATP, which allows the cell to work. And that is how the rest of your organism all work. Now, the problem comes is that there is a auto-regulation mechanism in the body when you eat food which is very rich in glucose, which I'll continue to use the word sugar because all of you understand that word. So as people eat food which is very rich in sugar, there is an enormous amount of sugar in your blood. Now, to control that, your body releases something called as insulin. Now, insulin tries to bring down that sugar so that there is a certain level in which there is a sugar level which is maintained consistently in your body. And as soon as you eat food, there is a dump of sugar. Your liver and all then release, your pancreas and all release insulin. Insulin starts bringing down the sugar. Then as the sugar comes down, you start to feel hungry. Then you eat something, again, sugar goes up, insulin comes in, tries to bring it down. So there is a constant like up and down within a very narrow band of a sugar level for a healthy person. So typically from 70 to 150 is considered as a 180. Today, nowadays, the standards keep changing, is considered as the healthy band of sugar in the body. People with diabetes, because of some chronic issues, there are issues with the pancreas, they eat, they have a very sedentary lifestyle, they start to get insulin resistance, you require more and more insulin to bring the sugar down, and your body starts to, there is a closed loop, there is a positive feedback in the bad kind, and that is how you need more and more insulin, and at some point, your body will deplete of insulin and sugars go high in the body. So that causes a lot of problems. You start to get cardiovascular diseases because as sugar goes up and falls rapidly, it starts to affect the blood vessels. And therefore you have cardiovascular diseases, you have diabetic foot, you have sometimes weight gain, which is not always so, but sometimes weight gain. So all of these are related issues coming from diabetes. And the bigger problem is that there are two conditions for diabetes called hypoglycemia, wherein the sugar is way above, and there is hypoglycemic attacks where sugar has gone way below. And the more interesting part for all of you, before I quickly jump in, because there's a lot more that we have to cover, your brain is one of the biggest consumers of glucose and cholesterol. It requires a lot of energy. For a brain which is maybe 1/100th the weight of your body, weighing just about 2 kgs or 3 kgs, consumes almost 30% of the energy demands of your body. And it requires a lot of glucose. So it is required. And when sugar levels fall way below 50, that is what is called an hypoglycemic attack. People start to get tremors, they faint, they become unconscious, and they can also go into a diabetic coma. So going below is actually more dangerous than going above, but staying consistently above has a lot more side effects. So that gives you a very brief, and the way to measure it is that people take a blood test, which is a single prick on, and they take a small drop of your blood, and they can measure the amount of sugar, glucose in the body. And when you have not eaten anything for 8 hours, 9 hours, it's called as fasting blood, early morning. And then when you have a good breakfast, and 2 hours after that, you take another blood test, which is also called postprandial. And this was the only information doctors were using to find out how diabetic you are and what kind of medication I must give you. Over the last few years, there is another new test, another common test which is coming up called HbA1c. This is the glucose attached to your red blood cells, and it is an average of 3 months. So it doesn't care about ups and downs of every day. It averages across 3 months, and that gives you a number. And anything, as I've written here, anything above 6.9 is considered sort of in diabetic area. Between 5.5 to 6.5, you're in pre-diabetic area. Anything below 5.2 and all, you're fairly healthy. And there is a lot of risk associated with it. So there are 3 tests that people used to use to find out how diabetic you are and what kind of a treatment the doctor must give you. But what was happening? There was a lot of implicit bias in the data. And how did it come about? Patients and people would, if they know they have to go for a test, they suddenly will behave well. They will eat correctly. 3 days, they will go walking so that I get a good sugar test, right? My sugar doesn't go up and people start to behave well and eat well. They will suddenly not eat what they typically eat and then trying to get, and that is fooling oneself. But that of course gives the wrong result to a doctor. Secondly, if I'm only measuring data in the morning 2 times, what happens to the rest of the day? How do I know what is happening on the rest of the day? So that is when you have something called as continuous glucose monitors, which is like a small contraption which takes a glucose reading every 15 minutes. We put patients on that to see how they are doing through the day. So here is the problem, right? There is a doctor and he is having incomplete data. And this is the typical chart. So this is from 12 midnight to 10 a.m. And you can see here, there is a blood glucose level on the left. This is the typical band from the gray part to the yellow, top yellow, which is the common healthy band that a person is typically in, right? And the blue line is the variation of the blood glucose over the day. Typically, a doctor is given these 2 values. That is, one at maybe 7 o'clock, you go to your local diagnostic center and you take one reading. You get what is called an FBS, fasting blood sugar. You eat something well, and then you take another test, and you are taking after 2 hours, by which time your sugar has gone up and is already on the way down. And that gives you the next reading. But look at this, right? This is the only data that the doctor was going with. But is this the complete data? No. If you look at his full day reading, you will actually see this is how his sugar level varied on the day, through the day. You can actually see that he was fairly stable. This patient was fairly stable up to about 12 o'clock when they had their dinner, lunch, and you can see this massive jump in their sugars. This data would have never been seen by a doctor. And he would have prescribed something to the patient just based on this first half of the day. And this is how a lot of patients have been misdiagnosed, have not been given the correct diagnosis because the doctors do not have the complete picture of this person. And still, is it still a complete picture? Unfortunately not, because this is one day of a person. Doesn't mean that all days are like this. So how do you solve this problem when there are different graphs in different days of the patient? So when you take these readings over the next 14, 15, 20 days, a continuous glucose monitoring, you start to get a new kind of a chart called as an AGP. I will not take you too much through the AGP, but what it does is essentially it takes a set of data over the same set of data over the next 15, 20, 30 days and builds a variability graph from this data. So what it gives you here in the bottom is a combination of all these 15 days of data into one single chart with a certain percentile definitions of the bands, so that you get an immediate picture about this patient as to how they're typically behaving in a day across many days, right? So that is why I'm saying that at every point of time, one has to always look into how is this data going to be useful for me. If I had left it at a single graph, that again would have resulted in the wrong diagnosis for a patient. Maybe that day he had a big pizza, had an ice cream, had a Coke, and that is why the graph was like that. It cannot be true for the rest of the days. So that is how you start to take data across many days and you build a single graph which is defining the behavior of this person as a percentile. So you can see here that the most of the time his median percentile was fine, which is the dark blue line. And you can see how this person's body behaved over the day. How many times was he in the 25th, 75th percentile? How many times was he in the 10th, 90th percentile? Gives you an idea about how this person's body is behaving. Now, why is this data useful? So let me take you a little more further on this. Because even if you look at a data like HbA1c, which gives you like a 3-month average, averaging is not a good metric for many, many types of problems. Why? This is the graph shown to you now. The graph that you're seeing now is a graph for an HbA1c of 5.5 to 5.7. So you can see how narrow the band is, how well controlled this person's physiology is. Within this gray band, his entire sugar variations is very neatly inside that band, right? So this is a healthy person. His sugar control is quite good. Nothing is ever going below or above the band. It is very nice, a HbA1c of 5.5, 5.7. But all of these are also 5.5 and 5.7. How do you then take an average to measure a behavior? All of these are 5.5, 5.5 to 5.7. Look at the variability. Look at this person on this bottom left, who has absolutely zero control on the sugar. Wide standard deviation, wide percentile changes happening inside his body for whatever he eats. Look at this person who has gone so many times below low sugar, which is a very, very dangerous condition to be. But yet, if you were to go and take a blood test with just the HbA1c, you would have given an HbA1c of 5.6 or 5.7. And what would you have assumed? You would assume that this person is fine. His body is healthy. So that is why one should always also be a skeptic of their own data. You should always have ways of arriving at a result from 3-4 different mechanisms so that you are sure about what this data means. So once we started to analyze the data, we started to see that many of the patients were actually showing more variability in their sugars in the second half of the day. And this is how we did. You look at averages of the sugars for these people, and you also look at the variability in their sugars on those days. You will see that there are more people showing higher variability in the second half of the day versus in the first half of the day. And you can also see a lot more people are in hyperglycemic, which is high sugars, in the second half of the day than in the first half of the day. And that is how you see that many of the patients get misdiagnosed and are treated wrongly when people look at only 1 or 2 points of information as to how this person's body should be or how is it behaving. Comes from looking at it from various mechanisms. How do I analyze data so that I get to see information useful for whatever I'm trying to do? So that is why, as data scientists yourself, it is just not the way that I apply one of the latest techniques to a data. It is how do I get data information for a business or a solution? So you need to be always pivoting. Also look at how the percentile graph that I showed you still doesn't tell me, it is showing me an end result. It is not showing me what is causing that kind of variability. It is showing me that there is variability, but at no point it is showing me what is the cause of it. So we tried to do something more, right? Can I look at some information to see, can I get some correlations about rise in sugar based on what you eat, when you eat? Does eating on time every day have a correlation with the kind of sugar level behaviors that I'm seeing? Does it have? These are the questions that you as data scientists also must ask the business. What will be helpful for you? What kind of data analysis will be useful for you? Then you can go back and see how to attack this problem. So that is what we did, right? We know that the factors affecting, if you constrain every other genetic issues or any other chronic congenital issues, if you look at lifestyle effects on a person, then it is the food that they eat, when they eat, how much exercise they do, when they do that exercise, all of these have very high correlation to how your sugars behave. So that is how we started to look at that. So see here, we started to look at time between meals. We started to see whether there is an effect of people when they eat having any effect on the sugar levels. So you can see here very clearly, people who do not eat on time, who have a large variability in their food timings. Lunch, sometimes they eat at 1, sometimes at 1:30, sometimes at 12:30, sometimes at 2 o'clock. That changes in the variability of when they eat regularly gives rise to almost 30% more hyperglycemic attacks, which is people's sugars going way above, and 25% showing hypoglycemic, that is sugars going way below. People think that they are doing it, they're too busy and they should not, I don't have time to eat right now, but you are only, believe me, you're only affecting your health and nothing else. It is very important for a body to know that the energy comes at regular times, the hormonal cycles keep in sync, it knows what to do next. But when you start varying your time, you start to see all these effects coming in. So this was a very clear effect that we could show in the company so that we could give the reminders to patients when is the time to eat based on the data that we've collected so far on them. So it started to bring people more into rigor as to when and how they eat. Now let's look at what you eat. When you eat was clearly a factor. Now let's look at what you eat. So as you can see, every food item, no matter what you eat, you can eat the fanciest of the fanciest food in the best hotel. You can eat the local street food next to your office. They all get divided into only 4 types of components, which are the macronutrients. Either it's carbohydrates, or it is fat, it is protein, or it is fiber. That is all there is. Irrespective of what you do, of course, there are small vitamins, minerals, all of that, but they're called micronutrients for the simple reason that they are in micro quantities. But majorly, no matter what you eat, they all get converted into these 4 types of macronutrients, which is carbs, fiber, protein, and fat. Now, all of these, the carbs, and all of them get converted into energy. So please don't be mistaken by people who tell you eat more protein or eat only fat, do a keto diet. It doesn't work, right? It is, everything gets converted into finally calorie. That means everything gets converted into glucose, and glucose gets converted into either fat or into energy. Now, but where is the difference? And so why people say don't eat too much rice, bread, don't eat too many carbs? Because carb is the one which gets most easily converted into glucose. It has a very huge spike. It's the easiest food item, macronutrient, which immediately gets converted into sugar, and it is taken up by the body. Then comes protein, which takes a lot more time for it to become into glucose. Then comes fat, which takes even longer to become into glucose. And then fiber, which has almost very little glucose into it. So we wanted to see how does this combination. So obviously it is not good. So if you can see, that's what I'm saying. So now the point is, how do we do useful analysis? So here is the analysis of the result that we have done, wherein we have changed the composition of the food that people have been eating. And you can see people who have reduced their carbs or had a more balanced food, which is that just not reducing carb, that you balance it with protein and fat, you start to see a drastic reduction in their sugar variability. And the time that they have spent in hyperglycemic, that means in sugar overload, reduces by almost 53% for people who have adjusted their diet versus people who did not change their carb load at all. And this is what it is. If you look at people who have reduced in carbs, increased their fiber, the amount of reduction, 30% reduction in the way that your sugar profile changes in the body. This is all useful information that you can show to a patient, to a customer, to the company can use it to build systems to give this kind of useful information to the doctor or to the patient. Again, it is just not enough to do statistics. Had I shown that kind of a sheet, a chart with range bar charts and all of that, the patient will not understand. You don't understand, I will not understand. What do I make out of this? So it is always good to keep a sort of a visualization of the data that you're trying to present to a patient or to a user or to a customer. So here you can see, in fact, I will take you to the next slide, which gives you even more better information. So you can actually show to the customer or to the patient, this is what you ate. It had a composition like this, which is 94 grams of carbs, so much of fat, so much of fiber, so much of protein. This was the calorie that you ate. And you can see the jump in their sugars. A typical heavy meal like this will give rise to an immediate rise in sugars. And if you're not a healthy body, it will take a long time for it to come down because your insulin doesn't work, sugar stays longer in the blood, and you tend to have that high sugars in the body for a long, long, long time. But if you're a healthy body, this will go up. Again, I'm not saying, please don't think that I should not eat this at all. People have to eat. Eating causes a spike, but if your body is healthy, insulin will bring it down immediately. So, but this is how we started to show information to the customer, to the user, to the patient, to the doctor. This is a good meal. Somebody had a balanced meal. You can look at the composition coming here, and you can see the rise in sugars to even lesser coming in. So the minute you combine several foods together, not eating only carb, but you combine it with fat, you combine it with protein. In old days, when people say eat, put ghee and eat, ghee is not a bad thing. It actually ensures that the release of glucose from your food takes place over a longer period of time than a pure carb would have done. But doesn't mean that you only eat ghee. That is what keto diets do, give you only fat. If you do fat, how does your body generate energy? It needs energy. So it starts pulling in from your muscle. It starts pulling in from your liver. It then starts pulling in from your fat reserves coming in, which also means that you lose muscle because if carbs are not there, then body takes it from protein. Proteins are your muscle. So that is why it is so important to do good data analysis so that you can show information to the patients. And here is how exercise affects you. Look at this person who has walked for roughly 5,000 steps during 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. See the drop in the sugar levels when they do this exercise. Look at the same thing when he does in the morning at 5, he does about 500 steps or 600 steps. There is hardly a change in the, and how do we correlate? We do the correlation. We have done it over so many patients now that coming in that it gave us a good insight as to how moderate exercise affects you, how high intensity exercises affect you. When should you do your exercise? It's not always a good thing to exercise early in the morning when you're already low on sugar. It may be a good thing to do later on. So these are all the insights that data science can give us so that a company or a business can build a useful feature for the market. So that is why I always keep in mind as to how what I'm doing is, how is it useful to what is the solution. So how did we put all this together? You have seen so much of analysis that has happened. You have seen so much of analysis. We have done correlations, cluster analysis, we have done PCAs, we have done all sorts of pivoting around to get data that can be useful. And we finally brought all of it together to do a system like this, building in vision forecasting into it. All I need for you is to take a picture of your food. My system would then automatically start to recognize what is on your plate. It tries to find out what is that volume, what is the how much of the area it's covering in the plate. And so therefore I know, sort of have a guesstimate of the kind of quantity of food that you're eating. And I can break it down into its macronutrients. And then because I have your sugar data over the last many months, I can actually try and predict where your sugar level will be if you were to eat this food. And you can see how we have actually mapped it. You can look at how the ground truth versus what our prediction median has been versus the variability that we're able to get into the system. This was the end result of all the analysis that we did, saying that, and of course, I didn't take you through how we did the vision analysis and the CNNs that we built and the YOLO frameworks that we had to modify, how we built all this in Keras, and how do we did the training, did an augmentation, the recurrent network behind it. That becomes a whole other talk. But the whole point is, ultimately, your solution has to go and fit into something. And it is for you as upcoming budding data scientists to actually realize this and figure this out. How is this data going to be useful? How is my analysis going to be of any value to the end product or to the end solution? So it is just not for the sake of analysis. So please ever don't think that I know how to do a principal component analysis and I can do clustering and I can do all sorts of things with this data. But ultimately, if there is no value to at the end point of where it finally reaches the user, all that analysis, all that knowledge and skill comes to a naught. So it is very important for you at every step of the way to understand which is the right tool to build, which is the right technique I must use here. Are there other techniques to which I can arrive at the same solution so that I can validate this data coming in, so that I am not getting implicitly, there is an implicit error and there is uncertainty in everything that you do, and I am taking that into account coming in and doing all of this. So this is how you finally decide to what your end goal should be, and how your analysis sort of dovetails into whatever that we are trying to build. And this is where you as data scientists come into picture, saying that how do I extract information from all these numbers so that I get useful information for it. So you can reach me anytime, and as I said, I may not be able to answer everything because nowadays we're sort of looking at very high big picture point of views. We're looking at sort of probabilistic networks, and if you ask me a question right now on how does one aspect of a time series analysis, how do I make it stationary, I may not be able to give you an answer immediately for that, but I'm happy to discuss questions, and anytime you would like to reach me on, please do feel free. And with that, I have come to the end of the presentation, and happy to take more and more questions.
Very interactive class. I think a lot of knowledge, even I gained a lot from this class in a way. This is one of the really good healthcare implementations of everything that we study in the program, and this is realistic implementations. If you're curious about more about this, do write directly to Satish or to the program coordinators. We can help you get more information.